The last thing I felt wasn't the knife sliding between my ribs. It was the warmth of my sister's hand holding mine, pretending to comfort me while she pressed the blade deeper. The rain was pouring that night, a cold, relentless sheet of water that washed my blood into the gutter, mixing it with the mud of the grave they had dug for me while I was still breathing. I can still hear the sound of her laughter, soft and melodic, contrasting sharply with the wet crunch of steel-piercing flesh. Beside her stood the man I had fought for, the man I had compromised my dignity to win against my own blood. He didn't even look at me. He was too busy checking his watch, impatient for the inheritance transfer to finalize. They told me it was mercy. They told me I was too weak to handle the company, too fragile to manage the wealth. But as the darkness swallowed me, I realized the truth. I wasn't weak. I was just trusting. And trust in my family was a death sentence. Then there was nothing. Just the void. The cold silence of the dead. And then I gasped. The air rushed into my lungs, sharp and painful like breathing in broken glass. My eyes snapped open, expecting to see the gray sky of the cemetery, the looming figures of my murderers. Instead I saw a ceiling. White, slightly cracked, with a familiar water stain in the corner that looked like a spreading virus. I knew that stain. I knew the smell of stale coffee and old textbooks that filled the room. I knew the scratchy texture of the polyester blanket tangled around my legs. I was in my university dormitory. I was 20 years old again. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands flew to my chest, frantically searching for the wound, for the blood, for the proof of my death. There was nothing. Just smooth, unblemished skin. I looked down at my hands. They were young, uncalloused, free of the rings they had stripped from my fingers in those final moments. I scrambled out of bed, my legs shaking, and stumbled toward the small mirror hanging on the back of the door. The face staring back at me was mine, but it was a ghost. My eyes were wide with terror, but beneath the fear I could see the spark of something else. Something hard. Something that had been forged in the grave. I checked the phone on my desk. The date glowed back at me in bright green digits. 5 years. I had been sent back 5 years. To the beginning of the end. This was the year I started fighting with my sister for Jason's affection. This was the year I began neglecting my studies to chase a man who was already sleeping with her. This was the year I signed over my voting rights in the family company because my father told me I was too emotional to handle them. A cold laugh bubbled up in my throat, harsh and unfamiliar. They thought they had killed me. They thought the story was over. But the story doesn't end when the protagonist decides to rewrite the script. In my past life I was a pawn. I moved where they told me I loved who they told me to love, and I died when they decided I was no longer useful. In this life I would not be a pawn. I would be the board. I would be the hand that moves the pieces. And I would not waste a single second on a man. Men were liabilities. Men were distractions. Men were the reason I was dead. My phone buzzed on the desk, shattering the silence. The screen lit up with a name that used to make my heart swell with hope for approval. In the past, I would have answered immediately, eager to hear her voice, eager to prove I was a good daughter. Now looking at the name I felt nothing but a cold, hollow disgust. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. I needed her to feel the hesitation. I needed her to know that the dynamic had shifted. Finally, my mother's voice snapped through the speaker, devoid of any greeting. "We've been trying to reach you for an hour. Your sister isn't feeling well again. The stress of the company preparations is too much for her constitution. You need to come home this weekend. You can skip your classes. We need you to handle the paperwork for her shares." I closed my eyes, leaning against the cool wood of the door. I could picture her perfectly. Sitting in the grand living room sipping tea, while my sister lay on the couch nearby, feigning a coughing fit to gain sympathy. They were already starting. The manipulation. The erasure. They wanted me to skip classes so I would fall behind. They wanted me to handle paperwork so I could be blamed if anything went wrong. They were setting the trap just like before. "No," I said. My voice was steady. "Come." It didn't sound like the voice of the desperate girl they knew. It sounded like the voice of a woman who had already seen the bottom of the grave. There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, confused silence. "Excuse me," my mother asked, her tone sharpening. "Did you just say no? Do you understand what is at stake here? Your sister's health is fragile. She needs you to support her. My sister is healthy enough to spend $50,000 on a party last week. I replied, my voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. And she is healthy enough to date the man you promised me. I'm not coming home. I am not handling her paperwork. And I am not giving up my shares. Not 1%. You ungrateful child, my mother hissed. We pay for your tuition. We pay for your life. You owe us obedience. You pay for my tuition because it was stipulated in grandfather's will, I countered, reciting the legal clause I had memorized in my past life during the long nights of regret. If you stop paying, I will sue for emancipation and full control of my trust fund early. Do you want the lawyers involved, mother? Do you want the auditors looking at where the company funds really go? Because I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the money you siphoned to pay for Emily's debts. The silence on the other end was absolute. I had struck a nerve. In the past I was blind to their corruption. Now I saw every crack in their foundation. You wouldn't dare, she stammered. Try me, I said softly. I have nothing to lose. I already died once. What else can you take from me? I hung up before she could respond. I didn't want to hear her screams. I didn't want to hear their excuses. I placed the phone face down on the desk and turned back to the mirror. I stared into my own eyes. They were dark, intense, and filled with a hunger that hadn't been there before. It wasn't a hunger for food or love. It was a hunger for control. I ran a hand over my reflection, tracing the line of my jaw. I was beautiful. I knew that now. In my past life I tried to hide my beauty to make my sister feel better. I dressed plainly. I spoke softly. I made myself small. Never again. I walked over to my laptop and opened my banking app. The balance was pathetic. Just enough for groceries and books. But it was mine. And I knew the future. I knew which stocks would crash next week. I knew which tech companies would rise from nothing to become giants. I knew the trends before they were trends. This small amount of money was not a limitation. It was a seed. And I was going to plant it in blood soil and watch it grow into a forest that choked them out. I opened a new tab and began to research. E-commerce. Logistics. Fashion. These were the industries I would dominate. But I wouldn't do it alone. I looked around my dorm room. It was lonely. But I didn't want a partner who would betray me. I wanted loyalty. I wanted devotion. I wanted women who were brilliant, beautiful, and hungry just like me. Women who didn't need to be saved but wanted to rule. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, not of fear but of anticipation. In my past life I was told I needed a husband to secure my position. I was told a woman alone was vulnerable. I would prove them wrong. I would build an empire where the only person I answered to was myself, and the only people I let close were those I chose. Those I owned. I opened a new document and typed a single line at the top of the page. Project Phoenix. Below it, I began to list the names of the companies I would acquire. Below that, I listed the names of the people who would pay for my death. My father. My mother. Emily. I didn't write them with anger. I wrote them with the detachment of a surgeon listing organs to be removed. They were obstacles. And I was the force of nature moving to clear the path. I walked back to the mirror and smoothed down my hair. I needed to go to the bank. I needed to change my passwords. I needed to secure my digital footprint so they couldn't track my investments. I needed to become a ghost in the system until I was ready to emerge as a god. I picked up my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. As I opened the dorm door, the hallway was bright, filled with the sounds of other students laughing, shouting, living their trivial lives. They had no idea what was walking among them. They saw a college student. I knew I was a weapon. I stepped out into the corridor, my heels clicking against the linoleum floor. The sound was rhythmic like a countdown. Tick, tick, tick. Every step was a second closer to their ruin. I didn't look back at the room I was leaving. That room belonged to the girl who died in the rain. The woman walking down this hallway belonged to the future. And the future was going to be exquisite. I thought about the senior I had seen in the library yesterday. The one with the ink-stained fingers and the fierce eyes who ignored everyone around her. She was designing something revolutionary, I could tell. In the past, I would have been too intimidated to speak to her. I would have been too focused on Jason. Now she was the only thing that caught my interest. A partner. A muse. Perhaps something more. I pushed open the exit door and stepped into the sunlight. It was warm on my face, a stark contrast to the cold rain of my memories. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of a second chance. They thought they had buried me. They didn't know they had planted me. And now I was going to bloom. I was going to grow so large, so powerful, so undeniable that their shadows would be completely erased by mine. I adjusted my sunglasses, hiding my eyes from the world. Let them wonder. Let them guess. By the time they realize who I am, it will be too late to stop me. The empire begins today. The harem begins today. The revenge begins today. And I will enjoy every single second of it. The knock on my dorm room door wasn't a request. It was a demand. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the thin wood, vibrating with the entitlement of people who believed the world owed them obedience. I didn't rush to open it. I let them wait. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and uncomfortable, knowing that on the other side, my father's patience was fraying and my mother's indignation was boiling. In my past life, I would have scrambled to open the door, apologizing for making them wait, smoothing my hair, checking my reflection to ensure I looked presentable enough for their inspection. Not this time. I took a slow sip of water, feeling the cool liquid soothe the throat that had screamed in the rain of my previous death. I walked to the door only when I was ready, when the mask of the dutiful daughter had been shattered and replaced with the face of a stranger they wouldn't recognize. I opened the door to find the 3 of them standing in the narrow hallway like an execution squad. My father, Richard, wore his expensive suit-like armor, his face flushed with irritation. My mother, Catherine, stood with her arms crossed, her lips pursed in a line of disapproval that I had spent 18 years trying to erase. And behind them, leaning weakly against the wall as if standing required too much effort, was Emily. She looked pale, her hand pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with feigned vulnerability. They had come to collect. They had come to drag me back into the cage I had just escaped. Victoria, my father said, his voice low and dangerous. You hung up on your mother. You do not speak to us that way. We are your family. You are my biological relatives, I corrected, stepping back to allow them into the cramped room. I didn't offer them a seat. I wanted them to feel the discomfort of the space, the stark contrast between their mansion and my dorm. Family protects. Family supports. You neither protect nor support. You consume. My mother gasped, a theatrical sound designed to draw attention. How dare you? After everything we've done for you? Emily is suffering, Victoria. The stress of the company is too much for her. She needs you to step in to take the administrative burden so she can recover. Emily coughed, a soft, wet sound that used to make my heart ache with worry. Now I saw the flush of health in her cheeks that she tried to hide with powder. I saw the way her eyes darted around my room looking for something to steal, something to claim. Vic, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. I just need you to sign the papers. Just for a little while. Until I'm better. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that made them all flinch. You want me to sign over my voting rights? You want me to skip my classes to manage a company I own shares in so that you can funnel the profits into your private accounts while I do the work? I know the scheme, Emily. I know the numbers. I know that the stress you're feeling is actually the stress of hiding your gambling debts from father. The color drained from Emily's face, genuine shock replacing the mask. My father stepped forward, his hand raising as if to strike me. I didn't flinch. I stared him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of the hatred I had cultivated in the grave. Touch me, I said softly, and I will release the forensic audit I had prepared this morning. Do you think the shareholders will appreciate knowing where their dividends are going, Richard? Or should I send the files to the tax authorities? He froze. His hand hovered in the air, trembling with suppressed rage before he slowly lowered it. He realized finally that the lamb had grown teeth. The silence in the room was thick, charged with the shift in power. They had come to dominate me and instead they were being cornered. I want to transfer, I announced, breaking the silence. There is a specialized business boarding college in Switzerland. It's rigorous. Isolated. I will be unable to come home for holidays. I will be unable to participate in family dinners. I will be focused entirely on my studies. My mother opened her mouth to object, but my father stopped her. He saw the opportunity. If I was in Switzerland, I was out of the way. I couldn't audit their accounts from across the ocean. I couldn't interfere with Emily's marriage plans. I would be isolated, dependent on their allowance and easily controlled from a distance. Switzerland, he mused, a cruel smile touching his lips. That is acceptable. We will transfer the tuition funds immediately. But you will cut contact with the press. No interviews. No scandals. Agreed, I said. I didn't tell them that the college I was applying to offered full merit scholarships for students with my profile. I didn't tell them that I had already submitted the application yesterday. I didn't tell them that I had no intention of using their money for tuition. They thought they were exiling me. They didn't know I was retreating to my fortress. They left shortly after, dissatisfied but convinced they had won. As soon as the door clicked shut, I exhaled a breath I felt I had been holding for a lifetime. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. The acceptance email from the Swiss program was already in my inbox. Full scholarship. Housing covered. Stipend included. I was free. But I needed more than freedom. I needed capital. My parents would still send the tuition money. They were too proud to admit I had won a scholarship, and they would want the receipt to prove they were providing for me. I would let them send it. Every cent. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew the market. In exactly 7 days, a small biotech company called Neuralink was going to announce a breakthrough in neural interface technology. Their stock was currently pennies. Within a month it would be worth hundreds. In my past life I had read about this in the financial section while I was locked in the house, pregnant with Jason's child, waiting for a husband who was cheating on me with my sister. I had memorized the ticker symbol out of boredom. Now it was my weapon. I logged into my brokerage account. I transferred the first installment of the tuition money my father had wired over, $50,000. It was meant to secure my education. Instead it was going to secure my empire. I bought the stock. All of it. I watched the numbers on the screen, knowing that while my family celebrated their perceived victory, I was planting the seeds of their destruction. I wasn't just investing money, I was investing time. Time I had stolen from death. As I waited for the transaction to clear, my mind drifted from the cold numbers to something warmer. I thought about the girl I had seen in the library yesterday. She had been sitting near the window, sunlight catching the gold flecks in her brown eyes. She was sketching furiously in a notebook, biting her lip in concentration. I had watched her for 10 minutes before she looked up and caught me. She hadn't looked away. She had challenged me with her gaze. In my past life I would have looked down, ashamed of my attraction, conditioned to believe that only men were valid options. Now I let myself feel the pull. The attraction was a sharp, sweet ache in my chest. Women were not liabilities. Women were not betrayals waiting to happen. Women were allies. They were partners. They were the ones who understood the weight of the world trying to crush them. I wanted to surround myself with them. I wanted to build a circle of women so strong that no man could ever breach it. The girl in the library was a start. But I needed more. I needed warriors. I needed artists. I needed minds that matched my own. I closed the laptop and stood up, walking to the window. The campus below was alive with students rushing to class, oblivious to the financial coup I had just executed. I placed my hand against the glass. My reflection stared back, superimposed over the world outside. I looked different. The slump in my shoulders was gone. The fear in my eyes was extinguished. I was Victoria Sterling and I was just getting started. The tuition money was invested. The family was pacified. The boarding school was secured. Now I had to prepare for the next phase. I had to build the team. I had to find the women who would stand beside me when I finally dragged my family's name through the mud. I picked up my phone and opened a new contact group. I named it, The Board. For now it was empty. But soon, it would be filled with the names of the most powerful women in the city. I would recruit them not with pleas but with offers they couldn't refuse. I would offer them freedom. I would offer them power. I would offer them me. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about creation. I was creating a new world, one where I was the sun and everyone else revolved around my gravity. I checked the stock price again. It had ticked up slightly. Just the beginning. Soon that 50,000 would be 500,000. Then 5 million. And when I walked back into that gala hall, when I stood before my father and mother, I wouldn't be the daughter asking for permission. I would be the CEO they had to beg for mercy. I turned away from the window and began to pack my bags. Switzerland was waiting. And I had an empire to build from the Alps down. The cord was cut. The family was severed. And I had never felt more alive. The notification arrived at 3:14 in the morning. A single, soft chime from my phone that sounded louder than any thunderstorm I had ever weathered. I was awake, of course. Sleep was a luxury for people who didn't have a future to rewrite. I sat in the dark of my dorm room, the blue light of my laptop screen illuminating my face like a mask of digital divinity. I picked up the phone and looked at the screen. Neuralink. The stock had opened early due to overseas trading leaks. The breakthrough was real. The neural interface worked. The value had surged 400% in the last hour. I didn't cheer. I didn't jump out of my chair. I simply leaned back and let the number sink into my bones. $50,000 had become $200,000. By the time the market officially opened, it would be $500,000. By the end of the week, when the public announcement hit the news cycles, it would be over $1 million. This was the first brick in the wall I was building around myself. Money was not just currency, it was armor. It was distance. It was the ability to say no to anyone who tried to tell me what to do. In my past life, I had begged for allowance money like a dog waiting for a scrap. Now I was the one holding the bowl. I closed the trading app and opened a new spreadsheet. I didn't withdraw the profits. Compounding was the secret of the wealthy, and I intended to be the wealthiest. I allocated portions of the incoming capital into 3 new ventures. I knew the trends of the next 5 years because I had lived them. I knew that sustainable beauty tech was about to explode. I knew that smart home logistics for single women was an untapped market. I knew that vintage luxury resale was about to become the primary status symbol for Gen Z. I registered 3 companies before breakfast: Glowtech, Safe Haven, and Velvet Vault. I set up the dropshipping logistics using contacts I knew would become reliable in the future, bypassing the scams and delays that plagued everyone else. I was not guessing. I was remembering. By noon, the online stores were live. I designed the interfaces myself, clean, minimalist, dominating. I wrote the copy with a tone that demanded attention. These weren't stores begging for customers. They were clubs inviting members. I used the initial capital to fund aggressive marketing campaigns on social media platforms I knew were about to change their algorithms. I watched the analytics dashboard as the traffic poured in. Orders trickled in, then streamed, then flooded. My bank account notification pinged repeatedly, a rhythmic symphony of success. Each sound was a nail in the coffin of my family's control over me. They thought they had exiled me to Switzerland to freeze me out. Instead, they had placed me in a neutral zone where I could operate without their scrutiny. But retail was small game. I needed infrastructure. I needed a platform that I owned, controlled, and could use to launch everything else. I spent the afternoon scanning acquisition targets. I was looking for something struggling. Something with good bones but terrible management. Something desperate enough to sell to a 20-year-old university student without asking too many questions. I found it in a small logistics startup called OmniStream. They had developed a revolutionary inventory tracking system, but the founders were artists, not businessmen. They were bleeding cash, mismanaging their supply chain, and on the verge of bankruptcy. They needed a savior. I intended to be their owner. I sent an encrypted email to their board of directors. I requested an emergency meeting via video conference. I did not ask for a time, I proposed one. 30 minutes from now. To my surprise, they accepted. Desperation makes people compliant. I fixed my hair in the mirror, putting on a blazer that cost more than their monthly rent. I wanted them to see success before I even spoke. I wanted them to feel the weight of my presence through the screen. When the call connected, there were 4 men on the other end. Middle-aged, tired, wearing suits that had seen better days. They looked at me with a mixture of confusion and condescension. They saw a girl. They did not see the predator. "Miss Sterling," the lead founder said, leaning back in his chair. "We received your offer. This is substantial. But we have to consider the implications of selling majority stake to an individual without a track record." I smiled. It was a cold smile, one that didn't reach my eyes. "You don't have a track record either, Mr. Henderson. You have a debt record. You are 3 months behind on server costs. Your primary investor pulled out yesterday. You have 48 hours before OmniStream is liquidated." The color drained from their faces. They hadn't expected me to know. They hadn't expected me to know about the investor who pulled out an hour ago. I had insider knowledge from my past life, memories of industry shifts that hadn't happened yet. I was playing chess while they were playing checkers. "I am not offering to save your company," I continued, my voice smooth and steady. I am offering to buy it. 65% equity. Full administrative control. I take the debts. I take the assets. I take the vision. You stay on as consultants if I deem your skills useful. If not, you walk with a severance package that is more than you deserve. This is hostile, one of them stammered. This is survival, I corrected. Sign the digital contract I sent. Or file for bankruptcy by noon tomorrow. The choice is yours. I ended the call before they could argue. I knew they would sign. Fear is a stronger motivator than pride. Within 2 hours the contract was executed. I was now the majority shareholder and CEO of OmniStream. I logged into the administrative panel. The dashboard was a mess. Red alerts everywhere. Inefficient routing. Leaked data. It was a disaster. It was perfect. I could fix this. I could mold this into the backbone of my empire. I opened the employee directory. I saw the names of the board members who had voted against innovation, the managers who had embezzled funds, the executives who had harassed the female staff. I had access to their files now. I saw everything. I opened a new email draft. I didn't call a meeting. Meetings were for discussion. This was a directive. I typed out the termination notices. I attached the evidence I had pulled from the server logs. Fraud. Negligence. Harassment. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them exactly why they were being removed. I told them that legal action would be pursued if they contested. I hit send on 12 separate emails. 12 jobs ended with a single click. I felt no guilt. These were the people who let the company rot. These were the people who would have fired me in a heartbeat if I showed weakness. I was simply cleaning house. I was scrubbing the infection so the body could heal. After the emails were sent, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. The room was quiet again. The sun was setting outside, casting long orange shadows across my desk. I had made $1 million in a week. I had acquired a company. I had fired a board of directors. And yet the dorm room felt empty. The success was cold without someone to share it with. Not a partner in the traditional sense. I didn't want a husband. I didn't want an equal who challenged my authority. I wanted devotion. I wanted beauty that served power. I thought about the women I had seen on campus today. The way they walked, the way they talked, the potential they wasted on trivial pursuits. They were diamonds buried in dirt. I wanted to dig them up. I wanted to polish them. I wanted to wear them. My mind drifted back to the girl in the library. Elena. I had asked my assistant to run a background check on her during the acquisition process. Old habits of control died hard. She was a senior in the fashion design program. Her portfolio was brilliant, but her grades were suffering because the professors didn't understand her avant-garde style. She was struggling financially, working part-time at a cafe to pay for her materials. She was perfect. She was talented, beautiful, and vulnerable enough to need me, but strong enough to create something worthy of my investment. I opened a new document and typed her name at the top of a new list. Project Velvet. I wasn't just building a company, I was building a court. And every queen needs her muses. I imagined her working for me. Not as an employee but as a partner. I imagined her designs bearing my label. I imagined her standing beside me at galas, wearing her own creations, looking at me with the same intensity one had seen in her eyes in the library. The thought sent a heat through my chest that had nothing to do with business. It was possessive. It was primal. I wanted to own her success just as I owned OmniStream. I wanted to be the reason she succeeded. I closed the laptop and stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the campus lights. Somewhere out there, my family was sleeping comfortably, thinking I was struggling in a foreign country. Somewhere out there, Jason was probably dating Emily, thinking he had won the prize. They had no idea that the ground beneath them was shifting. I had the capital. I had the platform. I had the vision. Now I needed the face. I needed the talent. I needed the harem that would define this new era. I touched the glass of the window, my reflection ghostly against the night sky. I was no longer Victoria the victim. I was Victoria the empire. And I was just beginning to collect what was mine. The night was young and I had work to do. Tomorrow I would go to the art department. Tomorrow I would meet Elena. And tomorrow the real game would begin. The scent of turpentine and wet clay hit me the moment I pushed open the doors of the art and design building. It was a chaotic organic smell, wildly different from the sterile scent of ozone and polished steel in the business school. Here creativity was messy. It was hands stained with charcoal, floors scattered with fabric scraps, and voices raised in passionate debate over color theory. In my past life I had avoided this building. I had been told that art was a hobby, not a career, and that serious women focused on finance and management. I had listened then. I had buried my own appreciation for beauty under layers of practicality to please a father who only valued profit margins. Now I walked through the hallway with my head high, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm against the concrete floor that silenced the lingering students. I was not here to observe. I was here to acquire. I had spent the night reviewing portfolios. Dozens of them. Most were derivative, safe, boring. They followed the trends instead of setting them. But one name had stood out on the list: Elena Voss. Her sketches were aggressive. They used structure to challenge the softness of the fabric. They were dangerous. And I loved danger. I found the senior studio at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, light spilling out into the corridor. I could hear voices inside. A man's voice, loud and dismissive. A woman's voice, quiet but steady. I stopped outside the door and listened. I wanted to hear her speak before I saw her. I wanted to know if her voice matched the fire in her drawings. "They are too structural, Elena," the professor said. I recognized him. Professor Marx. A man who clung to traditionalism like a life raft. Fashion is about flow. About movement. You are building cages, not clothes. No one will wear this. It is too cold. Too masculine. It is not masculine, Elena's voice replied. There was a tremor in it, but not of fear. Of frustration. It is armor. Women don't need to flow anymore, Professor. They need to stand. They need to be protected while they conquer. Why must beauty always be soft? Why can't it be sharp? Because it doesn't sell, Mark scoffed. You need to pass this class. Redo the collection. Use silk. Use pastels. Stop trying to be an architect and be a designer. I had heard enough. The incompetence was palpable. This man was trying to sand down the edges of a diamond because they cut his hands. I pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, drawing every eye in the room. There were about 10 students scattered around the studio, mannequins draped in various stages of completion standing like silent spectators. But my eyes went straight to her. Elena was standing by a drafting table, a piece of charcoal in her hand. She was wearing a black turtleneck that hugged her frame, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun that allowed stray strands to frame her face. Her fingers were stained with ink, smudged on her cheekbone. She looked tired, but her eyes were blazing. When she saw me, she didn't look away. She didn't blush or look down like the others. She assessed me. I walked into the room, ignoring the professor who was puffing up his chest to assert authority in his own domain. Professor Marx, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. You are wrong. He blinked, startled by my intrusion. Excuse me? Who are you? This is a closed studio session. I am Victoria Sterling, I said, letting the name hang in the air. Even within the university, the Sterling name carried weight, though most didn't know the extent of my recent independent ventures. And I am an investor. I know what sells. And I know that safety is the death of innovation. Softness is outdated. Power is the new luxury. I stopped beside Elena's table. I looked down at the sketch she had been defending. It was a gown, but constructed like a suit of armor, sharp shoulders, corseted waist, made of a material that looked like liquid steel. It was breathtaking. It was exactly what the world needed and exactly what my family feared. A woman who could not be broken. You cannot just come in here and disrupt my class, Mark sputtered, his face turning red. I am not disrupting, I corrected, turning my gaze to him. I am correcting. This student sees the future. You are stuck in the past. I suggest you grade her work based on its merit, not your insecurity. Or I will have a word with the dean about your tenure track. I hear the board is looking for reasons to cut funding for outdated departments. The threat was veiled but clear. Marx paled. He knew the Sterling family donated to the university. He didn't know I controlled the purse strings now, but he wasn't willing to risk it. He muttered something about reviewing the criteria and hurriedly retreated to his office, closing the door behind him. The room exhaled. The other students looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. I didn't care about them. I turned to Elena. She was watching me, her charcoal hand resting on the table. Her eyes were wide, the fire in them tempered with confusion. Why did you do that? She asked. Her voice was lower than I expected. Smoky. Because you were right, I said. I stepped closer, invading her personal space. I wanted to see how she reacted to my proximity. Would she step back? Would she flinch? She held her ground. She smelled of paint and vanilla. It was an intoxicating combination. And because I have a proposition for you. I don't need charity, she said quickly, her chin lifting. I can fight my own battles. I know, I replied, my voice dropping to a murmur that was just for her. If you needed charity, I wouldn't be interested. I don't invest in victims, Elena. I invest in partners. I don't want to give you money. I want to give you a platform. I want to build a brand around your vision. No more professors telling you to use pastels. No more compromises. Just you, your designs, and my resources. She stared at me, searching my face for the catch. Everyone had a catch. In her experience, men wanted her body. Women wanted her labor. They didn't want her mind. What do you want in return? She asked cautiously. Exclusivity, I said. Your designs belong to me. Your talent belongs to this company. And I paused, letting the silence stretch between us, thick and heavy. I reached out, my hand hovering near her face. I saw her breath hitch just slightly. I brushed the smudge of charcoal from her cheekbone with my thumb. Her skin was warm. Her eyes fluttered closed for a fraction of a second before snapping open again. And you belong to my vision. I take care of what is mine. I protect what is mine. But I also demand loyalty. Absolute loyalty. It was a bold move. Borderline inappropriate for a first meeting. But I was not playing by standard rules. I was building a harem of power, not just a company. I needed her to understand the dynamic now. I was the leader. He was the muse. And there was a line between those two roles that I intended to blur. She didn't pull away from my touch. She leaned into it almost imperceptibly. She was hungry for recognition. She was hungry for someone who saw her not as a student but as a force. What is the brand? She whispered. Velvet and vine, I said. Softness and strength. Just like you. I let my hand drop, but I kept my eyes locked on hers. I have the capital. I have the logistics. I have the marketing. I lack the soul. You are the soul. Think about it. But do not take too long. I move fast, Elena. And I do not wait for people who are unsure. I turned to leave, knowing that walking away was the final power move. I needed her to chase the opportunity, not have it forced upon her. I reached the door before I heard her voice stop me. Victoria. I turned back. She was holding the sketch tight against her chest, her knuckles white. When do we start? I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn since my rebirth. Tomorrow. My office. 9 a.m. Do not be late. I walked out into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind me. My heart was beating faster than it had during the stock trade. This was different. This was personal. I had secured the talent. I had secured the loyalty. But as I walked back toward the business wing, I realized I had also secured something else. A connection. In my past life, my relationships were transactional. I gave love to get security. This time I was giving security to get love. But it would be on my terms. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to my new assistant. Draft the contracts for Velvet and Vine. Equity split. 40% for Elena, 60% for me. Voting rights. 100% mine. I wanted her to feel like a partner, but I needed to ensure control. It wasn't distrust. It was protection. I would not let anyone else dictate her worth again. Not professors. Not investors. Not men. I would be the shield that allowed her to be the sword. As I walked, I passed a group of male students laughing loudly in the corridor. They looked at me, whistling softly. I ignored them. They were background noise. They were irrelevant. My focus was on the woman in the studio with the ink-stained fingers. She was the future. And I was going to wrap the world around her designs. The sun was setting again, casting long shadows across the campus. I thought about my family. They would be having dinner now. Father would be complaining about the market. Mother would be praising Emily's latest useless accomplishment. They thought I was alone in Switzerland, struggling. They thought I was weak. Let them think it. Let them sleep comfortably in their ignorance. While they slept, I was building an army. Elena was the first soldier. The first queen. There would be others. I could feel it. The empire was growing not just in wealth but in influence. And every woman I brought into my circle would be another brick in the wall that kept my family out. I touched my cheek where I had touched hers. The skin still tingled. It was a good feeling. It felt like ownership. It felt like love. But mostly it felt like power. And I was addicted to it. The warehouse smelled of sawdust and industrial cleaner, a raw, unfinished scent that reminded me of potential. It was a vast open space in the district of the city that most investors avoided, a place of broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. To anyone else it was a ruin. To me it was a canvas. I stood on the mezzanine level looking down at the floor below where my team was working. They were all women. That was the only requirement I had set when I acquired the lease. I did not want men lurking in the shadows of my creative space. I did not want the male gaze polluting the environment where we were building something sacred. I wanted a sanctuary. A place where beauty was not consumed but created. Where power was not taken but shared. I watched them move below me. There was Sarah, the head seamstress, whose hands moved over the fabric with the precision of a surgeon. There was Priya, the logistics manager who was organizing the shipment manifests with a fierce intensity. And there was Elena standing at the center of it all, directing the fitting session. She looked different today. The exhaustion from the university studio was gone, replaced by a vibrant energy that came from having resources. She was wearing one of her own prototypes, a structured blazer with sharp lapels that accentuated the curve of her waist. She looked commanding. She looked like mine. I had given her the keys to the kingdom, and she was ruling it with a grace that surprised even me. But then I never made mistakes in my selections. I only chose the best. I walked down the metal stairs, my heels clicking against the grate. The sound drew their attention. They stopped working and looked up. There was a reverence in their eyes that I had grown accustomed to. It was not fear. It was respect. They knew who paid their salaries. They knew who had rescued them from dead-end jobs and discriminatory bosses. I had recruited them personally. I had interviewed them not just for their skills but for their loyalty. I wanted women who had been overlooked, women who had been told they were too ambitious, too aggressive, too much. I told them they were exactly enough. And in return I asked for their devotion. It was a fair trade. I protected them from the world and they built the world for me. Status report, I said as I reached the floor. My voice echoed slightly in the high ceiling. Elena walked over to me, a tablet in her hand. Her eyes met mine and I saw the spark of challenge that I loved. The final samples are ready. The photography shoot is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The website backend is integrated with OmniStream's logistics. We are ready to launch in 48 hours. Good, I said. I reached out and adjusted the collar of her blazer. My fingers lingered on the fabric, then brushed against the skin of her neck. She didn't pull away. She leaned into the touch, subtle but undeniable. The air between us crackled. The other women looked away, pretending to be busy, but I knew they were watching. They knew what was happening. The dynamic between Elena and me was an open secret in the studio. It was part of the culture I was building. Love was not forbidden here. It was encouraged as long as it did not interfere with the work. And with Elena, work and love were becoming indistinguishable. Make sure the lighting is perfect, I told her, dropping my hand. I want the world to see exactly what we are offering. No filters. No apologies. They will see, Elena promised. Her voice was low, meant only for me. They will see exactly what you built. The launch day arrived with a storm outside, rain lashing against the warehouse windows, but inside the atmosphere was electric. We had set up a command center in the office loft. Large screens displayed the website traffic, the social media feeds, and the sales counter. I sat in the main chair, Elena standing beside me, her hand resting on the back of my seat. The rest of the team was clustered around the other desks, waiting. We went live at midnight. I watched the cursor hover over the button. This was the moment of truth. In my past life, I had launched projects that failed because I was hesitant, because I listened to the wrong advice. This time I knew the algorithm. I knew the timing. I knew the desire of the market because I remembered the future trends. I clicked the button. The site went live. For a second nothing happened. Then the numbers began to climb. 100 visitors. 1,000. 10,000. The server load spiked. The sales counter ticked over. 1 item sold. Then 10. Then 100. Within an hour the first collection was sold out. The armor line, as Elena had called it, was gone. The vine dress, made of a fabric that looked like living leaves, was backordered within 20 minutes. The comment section was flooding with praise. Women were tagging each other. Influencers were posting unboxing videos before the packages had even shipped. We had created a phenomenon. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. The tension in my shoulders released. It was done. We had proven them wrong. The professors, the investors, my family. They all said it wouldn't work. They said women couldn't build empires together. They said we were too emotional, too fragile. Look at the numbers. Look at the revenue. We had generated more in 24 hours than my father's company did in a quarter. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Elena was standing there smiling. It was a genuine smile, bright and unburdened. We did it, she said. No, I corrected, looking up at her. I did it. You executed. It was a harsh distinction but necessary. I needed her to know who held the power. I needed her to know that her success was tied to my will. But then I softened my expression. But you executed perfectly. You are indispensable, Elena. Her smile widened. She understood the dynamic. He accepted it. Then I suppose I need to be close by to ensure continued perfection, she said. The warehouse is too far from your penthouse. The commute is inefficient. I raised an eyebrow. Are you asking to move in? I am suggesting a strategic relocation, she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. For the work. Of course. Of course, I echoed. I stood up and dismissed the team. They cheered, popping champagne, but I didn't stay for the celebration. I took Elena's hand and led her out of the office. We walked through the empty warehouse, the silence returning now that the work was done. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the city glistening under the streetlights. We drove to my penthouse in silence. The air in the car was thick with unspoken words. I could feel her heat beside me. I could smell the vanilla and paint scent that was uniquely hers. When we entered the penthouse, I didn't turn on the main lights. I let the city glow illuminate the room. It was a vast space, minimalist and cold, just like I liked it. But tonight it felt different. It felt like it was waiting for her. I walked to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of wine. I handed one to her. She took it, her fingers brushing mine. She didn't drink. She set the glass down on the counter and walked toward me. The blueprints, she said softly. We need to review the next collection. The blueprints can wait, I replied. I set my own glass down. I stepped into her space, backing her against the kitchen island. The marble was cold against her back, but I was hot. I placed my hands on either side of her, trapping her. She looked up at me, her breath hitching. Her eyes were dark, dilated. She knew what was coming. She had been waiting for this since the studio. Since the first time I touched her face. Victoria, she whispered. It was half question, half plea. You belong to me now, I said. My voice was low, vibrating in the quiet room. Not just your work. I own your time. I own your talent. And I own this. I leaned in and brushed my lips against hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a claim. It was dominant and demanding. I tasted the wine on her tongue. I felt the tremor in her hands as they came up to grip my shoulders. She didn't push me away. She pulled me closer. She surrendered to the weight of my authority. This was what I had been missing in my past life. Not love, but ownership. Mutual ownership. I protected her and she gave herself to me. It was a contract written in touch and breath. I deepened the kiss, my hand moving to the back of her neck, tangling in her hair. She made a sound, soft and needy, that echoed in my chest. I wanted to keep that sound. I wanted to be the only one who could elicit it. I broke the kiss but stayed close, our foreheads touching. Stay, I commanded. It wasn't a request. Always, she replied. We moved to the living room, spreading the blueprints out on the glass coffee table. But we didn't look at them. We sat on the floor, surrounded by the plans for our empire, tangled together in the dim light. I traced the lines of her arms, the curve of her spine. I memorized her. She was the first of many. I knew that. I wanted more women like her. Brilliant, beautiful, devoted. I wanted a house full of them. A court of queens. But Elena was the first. She was the foundation. And as I held her there, listening to the hum of the city outside, I felt a sense of peace I had never known in my previous life. I was not alone. I was not weak. I was Victoria Sterling. And I had everything I needed. The family could rot in their mansion. The man could beg in his grave. I had built something real. Something lasting. And I had done it with women who loved me for my power, not despite it. The night stretched out before us, long and full of promise. The empire was launched. The harem was begun. And I was just getting started. The view from the 40th floor was not just a vista. It was a statement. Glass stretched from floor to ceiling, offering an unobstructed panorama of the city skyline, a jagged range of steel and concrete that used to intimidate me. In my past life I had looked up at buildings like this and wondered what it felt like to be the one looking down. I had imagined the people inside were gods, untouched by the struggles of the streets below. Now I stood behind the desk that occupied the center of the top floor, my hands resting on the polished surface of black marble, and I knew the truth. They were not gods. They were workers. And I was the owner. The office was silent, save for the hum of the climate control system. It was a sterile, expensive silence that smelled of leather and money. I had moved OmniStream's headquarters here yesterday. The previous owners would have choked on the rent, but I owned the building now. It was another asset in the portfolio, another brick in the fortress I was constructing around my new life. I walked to the window and looked at my reflection. The woman staring back was sharper than the girl who had died in the rain. Her suit was tailored to perfection, hugging the curves of my body without restricting movement. It was armor just like Elena's designs. But while Elena designed armor for the body, I was designing armor for the soul. I turned away from the window and sat in the high-backed chair. On my desk lay a single folder. It was labeled Special Assets. To the public, to the shareholders, and to the government auditors, this department was a branding initiative. It was designed to recruit high-profile brand ambassadors, women of beauty and influence who would represent the company at galas and events. It was a legitimate business expense. But I knew the truth. This was the foundation of my court. This was how I would gather the women who deserved to stand beside me. I did not want employees who clocked in and clocked out. I wanted devotees. I wanted women who were brilliant and beautiful and who understood that their potential was wasted on lesser men. I wanted to collect them. Not like objects but like partners. Like queens. The intercom on my desk buzzed. My assistant's voice came through, crisp and professional. Ms. Sterling, your next appointment is here. Ms. Lin for the CFO position. I pressed the button. Send her in. I did not stand up. I wanted her to come to me. I wanted her to walk across the expanse of the office and feel the weight of the space. I wanted her to feel small before I made her feel big. The double doors opened. Audrey Lin walked in. She was nothing like Elena. Elena was fire and ink in bold strokes. Audrey was water and glass and quiet precision. She wore a simple navy suit that was slightly too large for her frame, as if she was trying to hide herself within the fabric. Her hair was pulled back severely, exposing a neck that was pale and delicate. She wore glasses with thin silver frames that slid down her nose when she looked down. And she was looking down. She carried a portfolio case in both hands, clutching it like a shield. She stopped in front of my desk. She did not speak. She waited for permission. Good. She understood hierarchy. I looked at her resume again, though I had already memorized it. Top of her class at MIT. Former analyst at a Fortune 500 company before she was pushed out for refusing a superior's advances. Brilliant with numbers. Shy with people. Perfect. I needed someone who could manage the billions I intended to make without asking questions about the source. I needed someone who would be loyal to me because I was the only one who had ever protected her. I let the silence stretch for a full minute. I watched her shift her weight. I watched her fingers tighten on the portfolio. I wanted to see how she handled pressure. Ms. Lin, I said finally. My voice was low, echoing slightly in the large room. You were fired from your last position. What? She flinched. Her eyes darted up to meet mine for a second before dropping back to the floor. There was a discrepancy in the accounts, she said softly. My supervisor wanted me to sign off on fraudulent transactions. I refused. He claimed I was incompetent. He claimed I was difficult. I looked at her. I saw the truth in the tremor of her hands. She was not incompetent. She was honest. In my past life, honesty was a weakness that got you killed. In this life, I would make it a strength that got you paid. And now you are here, I said. Seeking employment from a woman who is 20 years old. Who has no formal business degree. Who owns a company that did not exist a year ago. Do you think I am a risk, Audrey? He swallowed. I noticed the movement of her throat. It was vulnerable. It made me want to protect her. It made me want to own her. Oh, Miss Sterling, she said. Her voice was gaining strength. I have reviewed your portfolio. Neuralink. OmniStream. Velvet and Vine. Your growth trajectory is impossible. It is not risk. It is inevitability. I smiled. She had done her homework. He was smart. I stood up. I walked around the desk. I wanted to be close to her. I wanted her to smell my perfume. I wanted her to feel the heat radiating from me. I stopped inches from her. She did not step back. She held her ground, though I could see the pulse beating rapidly in her neck. You're right, I said. It is inevitability. And I need someone to manage the inevitability. Someone who will not look away when the numbers get too big. Someone who will not ask why I know things before they happen. Someone who belongs to me. I reached out and took the portfolio from her hands. Our fingers brushed. Her skin was cool. Mine was warm. She looked up at me then. Really looked at me. Behind the glasses, her eyes were a deep, dark brown. They were intelligent. They were lonely. I saw myself in them. I saw a woman who had been told she was too much and not enough all at once. I saw a woman who was waiting for a hand to pull her out of the shadows. I placed the portfolio on the desk behind me. I did not look at it. I already knew she was qualified. I was not hiring her for her skills. I was hiring her for her loyalty. I walked back around the desk and sat down. I picked up a pen. I slid a contract across the marble surface. This is the offer, I said. The salary is 3 times what you made at your last firm. The bonus is unlimited. The benefits include full medical, housing allowance, and personal security. She looked at the paper. Her eyes widened. This is generous, she whispered. Too generous. Nothing I give is too generous, I said. But there are conditions. She looked up. Conditions? I leaned forward, resting my chin on my clasped hands. You will work for me. You will manage my finances. You will protect my assets. But you will also belong to my vision. You will be part of my inner circle. You will attend events with me. You will travel with me. You will be available when I need you. Not just professionally. Personally. I did not shy away from the implication. I wanted her to understand what she was signing up for. This was not just a job. It was a life. It was a commitment. I build empires, Audrey. And I do not build them with strangers. I build them with family. With women I trust. With women I keep close. Do you understand? She stared at me. The air in the room was thick. I could see the conflict in her mind. The fear of the unknown warring with the desire for safety. She had been burned by men who used her. She was being offered protection by a woman who demanded everything. Why me? She asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. There are hundreds of CFOs who would kill for this contract. Why me? Because you are honest, I said. And because you are beautiful. And because I want you. I did not soften the words. I wanted them to land with weight. I want you in my office. I want you in my confidence. And I want you in my life. If you sign this, you are mine. I will take care of you. I will ensure no one ever hurts you again. But you must give me your loyalty. Absolute and unconditional. She looked down at the contract. Her hand hovered over the pen. He was trembling. But it was not fear anymore. It was anticipation. She picked up the pen. She signed her name. Audrey Lynn. The ink was black and permanent. She set the pen down and looked at me. Her eyes were different now. The fear was gone. Replaced by a quiet resolve. I am yours, she said. I stood up and walked around the desk again. I stopped in front of her. I reached out and adjusted her glasses. They were slightly crooked. I pushed them up the bridge of her nose. My fingers lingered on her cheek. She leaned into the touch just as Elena had. Just as I knew they all would. Women were starving for this. Not just for money. But for recognition. For someone to see them and claim them. Welcome to the team, Audrey, I said. Welcome to the Special Assets Department. She smiled. It was a small smile, shy but genuine. Thank you, Victoria. She used my first name. I had given her permission. I stepped back and gestured to the door. Your office is next to mine. You start now. There is work to be done. She nodded and turned to leave. At the door she paused and looked back. I will not disappoint you, she said. I know, I replied. I dismissed her with a nod. When the door closed, I was alone again. But the room felt different. It felt less empty. I had added another piece to the puzzle. Elena was at the warehouse building the brand. Audrey was in the next office building the bank. Soon I would have security. I would have legal. I would have a house full of women who loved me and worked for me and belonged to me. I walked back to the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere out there my family was eating dinner. Somewhere out there Emily was plotting. They thought I was isolated. They thought I was alone. They had no idea that I was building an army. An army of women who would burn the world down for me if I asked them to. I touched the glass again. My reflection smiled back. It was a predatory smile. I was collecting power. I was collecting beauty. I was collecting love. And I was never going to let go. The empire was growing. The harem was growing. And I was the center of it all. I turned away from the window and sat back at my desk. I opened the next folder. There were more interviews tomorrow. More women to meet. More souls to claim. I picked up my pen. I had work to do. The silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was not the absence of noise but the absence of connection. For weeks my phone had been a fortress. Every call from the Sterling family estate was met with an automated message stating that the subscriber was unavailable. Every text was delivered into a void where I had deleted the thread before it could even register as read. I imagined them on the other end. My father, Richard, pacing the grand hallway of the mansion, his face purple with rage. My mother, Catherine, clutching her pearls, whispering about ungrateful children to anyone who would listen. And Emily. Poor fragile Emily. She was the one who felt the silence the most. She was used to me being the safety net. When she fell, I was there to catch her. When she needed money, I was there to work for it. When she needed a scapegoat, I was there to take the blame. Now the net was gone. And she was dangling over the edge. I sat in my penthouse, the city lights sprawling beneath me like a sea of diamonds. On the table in front of me lay a tablet displaying a live feed of the family's social media activity. I had hired a private security firm to monitor them. Not to protect me but to watch them squirm. It was fascinating. The calls had started 3 weeks ago. Polite at first. Then demanding. Then desperate. Now they were furious. But the most interesting development was today. Emily had taken to Instagram. She posted a picture of herself looking pale and weary, sitting in the family garden. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. Missing my sister so much. Worried about where she is. Please pray for her safety. She has been acting strangely since she left. The comments poured in. Concerned friends. Family acquaintances. People who remembered the Sterling name. They asked questions. Where is Victoria? Is she okay? Why isn't she answering? And then the subtle poison began to seep in. Emily replied to select comments. She says she is busy with work, but I know she is struggling. She never had a head for business. I fear she has fallen in with a bad crowd. She was planting seeds. She was trying to explain my absence and my sudden wealth without admitting that I had cut them off. If I was struggling, then her failure to control me was excusable. If I was wild, then her fragility was justified. She was rewriting history in real time. I scrolled through the comments, my expression unreadable. Audrey stood beside me holding a stack of financial reports. She had settled into her role beautifully. The shy girl who clutched her portfolio was gone. In her place was a woman who wore tailored suits and looked at me with unwavering devotion. She knew her place. She knew who held the power. Victoria, she said softly. The sentiment analysis is complete. Public perception is shifting. They are beginning to question her narrative. The engagement on her post is high, but the skepticism is growing. People are asking for proof of your struggle. They are asking why you haven't posted. Let them ask, I said. I didn't look up from the tablet. I watched a new comment appear. I heard she is in Switzerland. But why no photos? Emily replied. She is hiding. She is ashamed. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. She thinks shame is a weapon. She does not understand that I have nothing to be ashamed of. I'm not hiding. I am hunting. And prey does not announce its position to the hunter. What I said. Increase the security protocol. I do not want them finding the address of the warehouse. I do not want them knowing about Velvet and Vine yet. Let them think I am a ghost. Audrey nodded. She made a note on her tablet. She was efficient. She was loyal. And she was mine. I looked up at her. She was standing close within my personal space. She did not retreat. She waited for my next command. I reached out and straightened her tie. Her breath hitched. She knew what this meant. It was a mark of ownership. In the office she was the CFO. Here in the penthouse she was part of the inner circle. Part of the collection. You did well today, I said. The acquisition of the logistics firm in Singapore. It was seamless. Thank you, Victoria, she whispered. Her eyes were dark behind her glasses. I only follow your lead. Good, I said. As I have more for you. I want you to prepare the legal framework for the gala. We will be attending. But not as guests. As sponsors. Emily wants to humiliate me in public? I will give her a stage. But I will be the one holding the microphone. Audrey smiled. It was a small, satisfied smile. She enjoyed the revenge almost as much as I did. She had been burned by a superior once. She knew what it felt like to be powerless. Now she held the pen that signed the checks that controlled the world. She understood the justice of it. The door to the penthouse opened. Elena walked in. She was carrying a garment bag over her shoulder. She looked tired but exhilarated. The launch of Velvet and Vine had been successful, but the work never stopped. She was designing the collection for the gala. She saw Audrey and me standing close. She did not jealousy. She did not question. She understood the dynamic. We were not competing. We were collaborating. We were both orbiting the same sun. I finished the fitting, Elena said. She walked over to us. She placed the garment bag on the table. You need to see it. It is aggressive. I opened the bag. The dress inside was stunning. It was black, structured with sharp shoulders and a back that plunged to the waist. It was made of a fabric that shimmered like oil on water. It was dangerous. It was perfect. It looked like something a queen would wear to execute a traitor. I ran my hand over the fabric. It was cool to the touch. You outdid yourself, I said. Elena stepped closer. She placed her hand on my arm. Her skin was warm. I want you to wear this when you face them, she said. I want them to see what you built. I want them to see what you are. I looked at Elena. Then I looked at Audrey. They stood on either side of me. One the mind, one the soul. Both mine. In my past life I was alone. I was isolated by my family's manipulation. I was told that love was scarce. That I had to fight for it. That I had to compete with my sister for a scrap of affection from a man who didn't care. Now I looked at the women who stood with me. They did not compete. They complemented. They knew that my success was their success. They knew that my power protected them. And I knew that their loyalty was my strength. I was building a harem not of bodies but of minds. A court of women who would rule the world with me. Let them talk, I said again, looking back at the tablet. Emily was posting another story. A video of her crying. I just want her to come home. It was pathetic. It was weak. Let them talk, I repeated. Noise means we are winning. If they were truly powerful, they would not need to smear me. If they were truly secure, they would not need to beg for my return. They are scared. They feel the ground shifting. They know I am coming. Audrey stepped closer on my left. Elena stepped closer on my right. They flanked me. A guard of honor. A wall of devotion. What is the next step? Audrey asked. Her voice was steady. We wait, I said. We let the rumors grow. Let them paint me as a villain. Let them paint me as a failure. The lower they push me, the harder the fall will be when I rise. I turned away from the table. I walked to the window. The city was quiet now. The traffic had slowed. The world was sleeping. But I was awake. I was always awake. I watched my reflection in the glass. I saw the three of us. Victoria, Elena, Audrey. A triad of power. My family thinks money is power. They think shares and stocks are the only currency. They are wrong. Power is loyalty. Power is information. Power is the ability to look at your enemy and smile because you know their end. I turned back to them. Go home, I said. Rest. Tomorrow we work again. Elena hesitated. She looked at the couch. We could stay, she suggested. The design room is ready. We could review the accessories. Audrey nodded. The financial projections for the quarter can wait until morning. I looked at them. I saw the desire in their eyes. Not just for work. For proximity. They wanted to be near me. They wanted to share the space. I felt a surge of possessiveness. They were mine. And I liked having them close. Say, I said. But not to work. To rest. I gestured to the living area. There are guest rooms. But you are welcome to share the master suite. It is large enough. It was a test. A boundary push. I wanted to see if they would accept the intimacy. Elena smiled. He understood. Audrey blushed, but she did not look away. They accepted. We moved to the living area. The mood shifted. The business talk faded. The air became heavier, warmer. We sat on the couch. Elena leaned against my shoulder. Audrey sat at my feet, resting her head against my knee. I ran my hand through Elena's hair. I rested my hand on Audrey's shoulder. They sighed. They relaxed. This was the true empire. Not the buildings. Not the money. The trust. The closeness. The knowledge that when the world came for me they would stand in the way. My family had tried to break me by isolating me. They had tried to make me believe I was alone. They had failed. I was never alone. I was surrounded. I was protected. I was loved. I looked down at them. They looked up at me. There was no fear. Only devotion. I thought about Emily. She was alone in her mansion. She had her parents, but they used her. She had her fiancé, but he cheated on her. She had her money, but it was stolen. She was hollow. I was full. I was complete. Let her post her videos. Let her cry her tears. They were empty calories. They would not sustain her. When the gala came, when the truth was revealed, she would starve. And I would feast. I closed my eyes. I felt the weight of their heads against me. I felt the warmth of their bodies. I felt the pulse of the city outside. Sleep, I commanded softly. They obeyed. They settled into the cushions. I stayed awake. I watched over them. I was the guardian. I was the leader. I was the empire. The night stretched out before us, long and safe. The silence was no longer empty. It was full. Full of potential. Full of power. Full of us. And tomorrow the world would see what we had built. But for now we rested. The calm before the storm. The quiet before the face slap. I smiled in the darkness. I was ready. They were ready. And my family, they had no idea what was coming. The boardroom was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than the one I had grown used to in my past life. Back then, silence meant I was in trouble. It meant my father was disappointed, or my sister was plotting, or Jason was bored. It was a silence of judgment. Today, the silence in the OmniStream headquarters was heavy with awe. It was the silence of people realizing they were in the presence of something greater than themselves. I stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the polished mahogany surface. Behind me, the massive screen displayed a graph. A single green line that started low on the left and shot vertically toward the top right corner. It looked like a cliff. It looked like a weapon. 8 months. That was all it had taken. 8 months since I had acquired this company when it was bleeding cash and on the verge of collapse. 8 months since I had fired the incompetent board members and installed my own people. 8 months since I had implemented the algorithms I remembered from the future, optimizing logistics, predicting trends, and slashing inefficiencies. The number on the screen glowed in bright green. Revenue growth. 100 times. We had multiplied the revenue over 100 times in less than a year. We were no longer a startup. We were a unicorn. We were a global player. And I owned 65% of it. I looked around the table. The executives sitting there were a mix of retained talent and my new recruits. They were mostly women. I had made it a priority to promote those who had been overlooked by the old boys club. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and adoration. They knew I was ruthless. They knew I had fired people who wasted my time. But they also knew I rewarded loyalty extravagantly. They knew that if they succeeded they would be rich. If they failed they would be gone. There was no middle ground. I picked up the laser pointer. I clicked it. The red dot danced on the screen. This is not luck, I said. My voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. This is precision. This is what happens when you remove the ego from the equation. This is what happens when you stop trying to please men and start trying to please the market. I paused. I let the implication hang there. Some of the men in the room shifted uncomfortably. They knew they were on borrowed time. Their roles were being phased out, replaced by women from my special assets department. We are expanding into Europe next week. Asia the following month. I want the logistics network ready. I want the warehouses stocked. I want no errors. Yes, Miss Sterling, they chorused. It was like a prayer. Meeting adjourned, I said. I didn't wait for them to stand. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't need to hear their congratulations. I didn't need their validation. I knew what I had done. I walked down the hallway to my private elevator. The doors slid open immediately. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the penthouse office. As the elevator ascended, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked powerful. The suit I was wearing was custom-made by Elena. It fit like a second skin. It reminded me of who I was. I was not the girl who died in the rain. I was the woman who owned the storm. But business was only half the victory. Power without pleasure was just work. And I had worked hard enough. Today was a celebration. But not a public one. I did not want the press. I did not want the investors. I did not want the vultures circling around my success trying to pick at the bones. I wanted my inner circle. I wanted the women who had built this with me. I wanted my harem. The elevator dinged. I walked out and straight to the helipad on the roof. The helicopter was waiting. The blades were already spinning. I climbed in without hesitation. The pilot was a woman I had recruited from the military. She nodded to me. No words were needed. We took off. Below us the city shrank. The buildings became toys. The people became ants. I looked out the window. I thought about my family. They were down there somewhere. Probably in their mansion. Probably wondering where I was. Emily had posted another video yesterday. She was crying again. She was telling her followers that I had joined a cult. That I was brainwashed. She was trying to explain away my silence. She was trying to make herself the victim of my disappearance. It was pathetic. If she knew where I was going, she would vomit with jealousy. I was not in a cult. I was in a kingdom. And I was the queen. The helicopter landed on the deck of the yacht. The Sterling Dawn. It was a vessel I had purchased anonymously last month. 150 feet of pure luxury. It was floating in the international waters off the coast, away from prying eyes. I stepped out of the helicopter. The sea breeze hit my face, salty and fresh. It smelled like freedom. I walked across the deck. The crew was invisible. I had instructed them to remain below decks unless summoned. This space was for us. For me and mine. I walked to the aft deck. It was set up for a private dinner. White linen tables. Crystal glasses. Candles flickering in the wind. But the centerpiece was not the food. It was them. Elena and Audrey were waiting for me. Elena was wearing a dress she had designed herself. It was sheer and flowing, clinging to her curves like water. She looked like a goddess of the sea. Audrey was wearing a sharp navy suit, no tie, the top button of her shirt undone. She looked like a financier who had decided to take the night off. They stood up when they saw me. They did not speak. They waited. I walked to them. I stopped between them. I looked from one to the other. Elena on my right. Audrey on my left. The creative and the logical. The fire and the ice. Both bound to me. Both mine. I reached out and took Elena's hand. Her skin was warm. Then I took Audrey's hand. Her skin was cool. I squeezed them both. They stepped closer. They knew what this meant. This was not a business meeting. This was a communion. You did well, I said to Audrey. The numbers were perfect. Audrey blushed. She looked down, then up through her lashes. I only followed your instructions, Victoria. And you, I said to Elena, turning my head. The suit I wore today. The board was terrified of me. Half of it was the numbers. The other half was the armor you built. Elena smiled. It was a radiant smile. I built it for you. Only for you. I pulled them closer. We were standing at the railing of the yacht. The ocean stretched out behind us, dark and endless. The only light came from the candles and the stars. I felt a surge of possessiveness so strong it almost knocked the breath out of me. This was what I had fought for. This was what I had died for. Not the money. Not the stocks. But this. The ability to choose who stood beside me. The ability to love without shame. In my past life I had to hide my desires. I had to pretend to want Jason. I had to pretend to be straight. I had to pretend to be weak. Now I was surrounded by women who knew my darkness and loved me for it. Come, I said. I led them to the lounge area. There was a large sofa facing the ocean. I sat down in the center. I did not ask them to sit. I waited. Elena sat on my right, leaning her head on my shoulder. Audrey sat on my left, resting her hand on my knee. They fitted perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle I had solved. I poured champagne into 3 glasses. I handed them out. We drank. The bubbles tasted like victory. To the Empire, I said. To the Empress, Elena corrected softly. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. To the Empress, then. We clinked glasses. I set mine down. I turned to Elena. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes closed. She leaned into my hand. You are tired, I observed. The collection, she murmured. It takes everything out of me. But seeing you wear it, it puts it back in. You need to rest, I said. You are my asset. I need you sharp. I am sharp, she said. She opened her eyes. They were dark with desire. For you. I turned to Audrey. He was watching us. She was not jealous. He was aroused. The dynamic between us was complex. It was not traditional. It was not monogamous in the standard sense. We were a triad. A closed loop. I was the center. They orbited me. And sometimes their orbits crossed. And you, Audrey? I asked. Are you sharp? Audrey swallowed. She adjusted her glasses. I am always ready for you, Victoria. You know that. I know, I said. I reached out and touched her cheek. She turned her face into my palm. He kissed the center of my hand. It was a gesture of submission. Of devotion. I accepted it. I deserved it. I had saved them. I had given them purpose. I had given them each other. Good. Because the gala is coming. And I will need you both at my side. My family will be there. They will try to break me. They cannot, Elena said. Her voice was fierce. We will not let them. No, I agreed. They cannot. But I want them to see. I want them to see what I have built. I want them to see who I love. I looked at both of them. I want them to know that I do not need them. I have everything I need right here. Audrey moved closer. She rested her head on my other shoulder. Now I was sandwiched between them. Warmth on both sides. Safety on both sides. We are your family, Audrey whispered. Not them. Us. Yes, I said. Us. I closed my eyes. I felt the movement of the yacht on the water. Gentle rocking. Like a cradle. But I was not a child. I was a woman. A powerful woman. And I was loved. In my past life I had died alone. I had died unloved. I had died believing I was unworthy. Now I was surrounded by love. But it was not the weak, clinging love of my parents. It was strong. It was loyal. It was earned. I opened my eyes. The stars above were bright. The ocean was dark. But I was not afraid of the dark anymore. I owned the dark. I owned the light. I owned the women beside me. I wrapped an arm around Elena. I wrapped an arm around Audrey. I pulled them tight against me. They sighed. They relaxed. They trusted me. Sleep, I commanded softly. We have a big day tomorrow. The preparations for the gala begin. Yes, Victoria, they whispered in unison. They did not leave. They stayed there, curled against me on the sofa. I did not move them. I wanted them there. I wanted to feel their breath. I wanted to feel their heartbeats. They were my proof of life. They were my proof of success. The money was just paper. The companies were just buildings. This was real. This connection. This devotion. I looked out at the horizon. The sun would rise soon. And with it, the final phase of my plan would begin. The gala. The face slap. The end of the Sterling family's reign. And the beginning of mine. I smiled in the darkness. I was ready. My queens were ready. And the world was not ready for us. I closed my eyes. I listened to the sound of the ocean. I listened to the sound of their breathing. It was the only music I needed. The empire was secure. The harem was loyal. And I was home. The report on my desk was thin. But the weight of the information contained within those few sheets of paper was heavy enough to crush a lesser person. Audrey had placed it there silently this morning, her expression unreadable behind her glasses. She knew what it contained. She knew what it meant. It was a transcript of a recorded phone call. Not mine. Emily's. He had been speaking to Jason. The man who had killed me in my past life. The man who was currently bleeding my sister dry in this one. I picked up the paper. The ink was black, stark against the white background. I began to read. Their voices were captured in text, flat and dead, but I could hear the desperation in Emily's tone. He was begging. He was refusing. I need you to stand by me, Jason, Emily had said. The gala is next week. If she shows up, we need to be united. United? Jason had replied. His voice was cold. Emily, look at the accounts. Your father's assets are frozen. Your allowance is cut. Victoria is blocking every transfer. What do you have to offer me? I have the family name, Emily had pleaded. The name is tarnished, Jason had scoffed. And you are fragile. I need a partner who can handle the pressure. Victoria was strong. You're just broken. I lowered the paper. A slow smile spread across my face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator watching the trap snap shut. In my past life, Jason had chosen Emily because he thought she was easier to control. He thought I was too strong, too independent. He wanted a doll he could dress up and display. But Emily was not a doll. She was a drain. And now that the money had stopped flowing, now that I had severed the artery of the family wealth, he was losing interest. He was a parasite. And parasites only stay attached as long as the host is bleeding profit. Now that the host was dry, he was looking for a new vein. I stood up and walked to the window of my office. The city was gray today, the sky heavy with impending rain. It matched the mood of the Sterling mansion, I was sure. Emily was panicking. She knew Jason was slipping away. She knew her parents were turning on her, blaming her for failing to secure the merger with my companies. She was alone. And when a cornered animal is alone, it becomes dangerous. The lashes out. I tapped the glass. I knew what she would do. She would try to drag me down with her. If she couldn't have the money, she would have my reputation. She would try to paint me as the villain who abandoned her sick sister. She would try to make me the monster so she could remain the victim. Audrey spoke from the doorway. She had been waiting for my reaction. She is attempting to contact the press, she said. Her voice was calm. We have intercepted 3 attempts to sell your location to paparazzi agencies. She is offering exclusive rights to your private residence. She is claiming you are holding us hostage. I turned to face her. Is she? No, Audrey said. He walked into the room. She moved with a confidence that had grown over the last few months. She was no longer the shy girl who clutched her portfolio. She was my CFO. He was my partner. We are free to leave at any time. But she does not understand loyalty. She thinks everyone has a price. She is right, I said. Everyone has a price. But she miscalculated mine. My price is not money. It is devotion. And she cannot buy that. I walked back to the desk. Who is handling the security breach? Roxy, Audrey said. Her team is already in position. They have traced the leak to a burner phone Emily purchased yesterday. They have the location of the journalist she was supposed to meet. Good, I said. I do not want the journalist harmed. I want the information contained. But I want Emily to know that we know. I want her to feel the walls closing in. I picked up my pen. Prepare the cease and desist. Not from the company lawyers. From my personal attorney. I wanted to cite defamation, harassment, and attempted corporate espionage. I want the damages listed to be equal to her entire remaining trust fund. I want her to know that if she proceeds, she will be bankrupt before the gala even starts. Audrey nodded. She took the order. He did not question it. She knew that mercy was not an option. Mercy was what had killed me in the past. Mercy was letting Emily live while she plotted my death. This was not cruelty. This was survival. It will be sent within the hour, she said. She hesitated. She looked at me. Her eyes were soft behind the lenses. You should rest, Victoria. You have been working for 18 hours. I rest when the job is done, I replied. But I softened my tone. I saw the worry in her face. He cared for me. Not just for the CEO. For the woman. Come here. He walked around the desk. I stood up and pulled her into my arms. She rested her head against my chest. I could feel the steady beat of her heart. It was slower than mine. He grounded me. In the midst of the war I was waging, she was my peace. I ran my hand down her back. He shivered. You protect me well, Audrey, I whispered. I protect what is mine, she murmured into my suit jacket. And you are mine, I said. I kissed the top of her head. Do not forget that. The door opened again. Elena walked in. She was carrying a garment bag. She saw us embracing. She did not stop. She did not apologize. She walked over and joined the circle. She placed her hand on my arm. The legal document is drafted, she said. I reviewed the clauses. They are aggressive. They need to be, I said. I did not let go of Audrey. I reached out and pulled Elena closer. Now I had them both. The mind and the soul. Emily is trying to sell my location. She thinks she can profit from my privacy. She is desperate, Elena said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were dark, filled with a fierce protectiveness. She does not know you. If she knew you, she would know you cannot be bought. She would know you are the buyer. Exactly, I said. I looked between them. The gala is in 3 days. They plan to humiliate me there. They think I will arrive with nothing. They think I will be the poor cousin coming to beg. You will arrive as the queen, Audrey said. And you will be there? I asked. Always, Elena said. I designed the security details uniforms myself. They will be invisible. But they will be there. Roxy is finalizing the perimeter, Audrey added. No one gets to you without our clearance. Not even your father. I felt a surge of warmth in my chest. It was not just love. It was power. The power of knowing that I was surrounded by women who would burn the world for me. In my past life I had stood alone against them. I had faced Jason and Emily with nothing but my own trembling hands. Now I had an army. I had a shield. I had a harem that was not just for pleasure but for protection. Good, I said. Then let them try. Let them send the press. Let them send the lawyers. Let them send whatever they have. We will crush them. I released them and walked to the window again. The rain had started. It streaked down the glass, blurring the city lights. Roxy, I called out. I knew she was outside the door. She was always there. The door opened. Roxy stepped in. She was tall, muscular, with short cropped hair and eyes that scanned the room constantly. She wore a tactical suit that was tailored to look like business attire. She was the head of my security. She was the muscle behind my mind. Miss Sterling, she said. She nodded to Audrey and Elena. They nodded back. They respected her. She respected them. We were a unit. The leak? I asked. Contained, Roxy said. The journalist has been persuaded. He will not publish. Emily's phone has been cloned. We know every contact she has. We know every plan she makes before she makes it. Good, I said. Send the legal notice. Then I want you to double the guard at the warehouse. I do not want Elena's designs leaked before the gala. I want the reveal to be perfect. It will be, Roxy said. Nothing gets past you. Dismissed, I said. She left. Silent as a shadow. I turned back to my women. 3 days, I said. 3 days until the end of the Sterling legacy. 3 days until the beginning of mine.